You know that feeling, right? That jolt of culture shock you get just by stepping off a plane into a new city? Well, today we're diving into why American and European cities can feel like they're from completely different planets, and what that tells us about the people who call them home. So let's start with the big question. Why does a European city feel so profoundly different from an American one? And I'm not just talking about the old buildings. The answer goes way deeper. It's about two fundamentally different ways of approaching life itself. You can almost feel it in the air. On one side, a city built around the noise and rhythm of the automobile. On the other, a space designed for human conversation, for the sound of footsteps and bicycle bells. This difference isn't some happy accident. It's the direct outcome of very different ideas about what a city, and maybe even a society, should be for. Okay, so to really understand why these places are so different, we have to zoom out. We need to look past the pavement and the buildings and get to the core beliefs, the foundational ideas that shape these societies from the ground up. Check this out. A Pew survey from back in 2011 really hit the nail on the head. It found this major philosophical split. Generally speaking, Americans tend to put individual liberty first, the freedom to succeed or fail on your own terms. Europeans, on the other hand, tend to put more emphasis on the role of the state in creating a safety net, making sure no one falls through the cracks. And when you look at the numbers, the difference is, well, it's stark. A solid 58% of Americans chose individual liberty. But in every single European nation they polled, a majority said the state's guarantee was more important. This isn't just a minor disagreement, it's a huge gap that shapes everything from politics to personal goals. This belief in individual control has a massive effect on how people see success. Nearly 3/4 of Americans, 73%, believe that hard work is the key to getting ahead. Compare that to Europe, where the median is just 35%. Now, this isn't about one side being lazy and the other not. It's about a different fundamental belief in how much control an individual really has over their own destiny. So these are all big, abstract values, right? But how do they go from being an idea in someone's head to a rule that affects millions of people? Let's look at how these beliefs actually get turned into policies and regulations. In Europe, a lot of regulation is guided by something called the precautionary principle. It's basically the ultimate better safe than sorry approach. If a new technology or chemical comes along and the science is still out on its long-term effects, the default position is to restrict it until it's proven to be harmless. The US usually takes the opposite tack. New things are generally allowed unless or until they're actually proven to cause harm. But, and this is a really big but, it is not as simple as one side being reckless and the other being overly cautious. And that leads to this really fascinating idea called particularized divergence. It sounds a little academic, but the idea is simple. Neither side is always more cautious. They just worry about different things. So yeah, Europe is super cautious about GMOs, but the US was way more precautionary about mad cow disease, banning beef imports and blood donations much more strictly than Europe did. It's all about what risks to choose to focus on. Okay, so we've talked philosophy and we've talked rules. Now let's see how all of this stuff actually impacts one of the most basic parts of our lives, our work. This is where those big ideas become very, very real. A recent survey pretty much confirms the stereotype. Americans tend to work longer hours. While half of Europeans are clocking in for a standard work week, you see that the single largest group of Americans, that's 40%, are regularly putting in overtime, working 41 to 50 hours every week. But the biggest difference, the real chasm, isn't in the day-to-day grind. It's in taking a break. A staggering 60% of Americans say they never take an extended holiday of 2 weeks or more. That's a type of break that's considered a totally normal, necessary part of the year for most Europeans. And this goes beyond company policy. It's a deep-seated cultural thing. The survey found that 1/3 of Americans actually feel guilty about taking time off. That's nearly double the rate for Europeans. It creates this culture of pressure where you feel like you always have to be on, even if you're sick or just completely burned out. And what's the end result of all this? Well, the numbers really speak for themselves. More than half of Europeans say they're happy with their work-life balance. For Americans, it's just about 1/3. In fact, Americans are almost twice as likely to be actively unhappy with it. So these different priorities about work and leisure don't just affect our calendars, they physically sculpt the world we live in. Let's circle back to our original question and see how this all comes together in the very concrete design of our cities. One urban planning analyst puts it about as bluntly as you can. For decades, the story of many American cities was one of urban renewal. that often meant tearing down historic, human-scale buildings to make way for highways and parking lots. That one choice has had a profound impact that lasts to this day. On the flip side, European cities often have laws that specifically mandate designs that put people first. They build these incredible walkable centers and invest in serious bike networks. But this is the key. They embrace mixed-use neighborhoods. In so many parts of America, zoning laws literally make it illegal to build a simple corner store in a residential area, forcing you into your car for every little thing. And of course, this approach has a huge impact on how much it costs to live. Take a city like Vienna, where the city itself is a massive landlord and treats housing as a piece of essential infrastructure, not just an investment. That helps keep housing costs way down compared to major US cities, where housing is often a speculative game and a huge chunk of your paycheck just goes to keeping a roof over your head. But what if the most profound difference of all isn't something you can see on a map or in a city budget? What if it's something you just feel? What if it's about how we perceive time itself? This is so interesting. Social psychologists have found that different cultures sort of package time into different units. For a lot of Americans, the basic unit for being on time is about 5 minutes. So if you show up 10 minutes late, you feel like you're 2 units late. But in other cultures, that basic unit might be 15 minutes, which completely changes what on time even means. So are these two worlds just destined to drift further and further apart? Well, not necessarily. Legal scholars talk about a process they call hybridization. The idea is that instead of one culture just absorbing the other, it's this messy, continuous exchange of ideas, where both sides are constantly borrowing from each other and evolving. And that ongoing exchange really leaves us with one last big question to chew on. As our worlds get more and more connected, what are the best ideas, the best pieces of each world that we should choose to borrow from each other to build a better future?